Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Simply Walk the Talk. I am your host, JoshuaJHolland, and today we've got a very, very fun episode planned for you. This is all about the bookmaking process and writing and ghostwriting and co-writing and all the things about writing books. And for those of you that really know me, you know that I am an avid reader, a voracious reader, similar to my guest. And my guest on the show happens to be someone that I worked with very closely to help write this book and get this book published. And so my guest for today, his name is Jesse Krieger. And Jesse is the founder and publisher of Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. Try to say that 3 times fast. Huh? Jesse sits squarely at the intersection of publishing and promotion, helping authors successfully launch their book and use it as their best business development tool, bringing in clients they love and exciting new opportunities. Jesse has been an entrepreneur and voracious reader his entire adult life, holding degrees from UC Berkeley, Beijing Normal University, and National Taiwan University. When not publishing books, Jesse enjoys gardening, good food, and dinner parties at his home in Las Vegas. That sounds like a dating profile. I love it.
Did I send Jesse, the wrong bio?
Right. So Mr. Jesse Krieger, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me here, Joshua.
Yeah. So, this is something I've wanted to do for a very long time because, we've worked together since my days in LA, when I was sort of living in LA. I guess I can say I was living in LA, which most people know that I'm based in New York, but I was in LA for a while. And, there was a time that I decided to write a book, and I was really seriously considering self-publishing a book. And, I was pretty naive in what goes into publishing a book. And so I was talking to my good friend, Lynn May, and I had him on my podcast, and we started talking about the fact that he was coming out with a book. And so he was just kind of telling me what he was going through and where he was at. And I thought, you know what, let's do this. And so he connected me to you, Jesse Krieger of Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. And he mentioned that you kind of specialize in working with new authors and first-time authors. And so I thought, okay, let's have a conversation. And, a year or so later, here we are. So before we start to actually dive into that actual process, let's talk about your background and let's talk about sort of what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure thing. So as you mentioned, I've been an entrepreneur in some shape or form for now like 20 years. And that's taken a number of different shapes and forms over time. But it started in the music space. I mean, from I think 13 years old or so, I got an electric guitar, fell in love with Jimi Hendrix, fell out of love with school, and started being in bands and doing that whole thing. So from an early stage, I knew that I was passionate about music, and I followed that and pursued it. Moved to LA right after high school, went to Los Angeles Music Academy. And then I traveled to Europe with some friends, and I ended up skipping out my ticket home and lived in Europe for the better part of a year, playing in a duo in bars and clubs, lived in a student dorm and turned it into a recording studio and started producing our own music and others, and eventually moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where I went to audio engineering school. And that's where I really started what was my first business and band. So I met my business partner and bandmate. His name was Jake Harsh in Nashville. And we started writing together. We started living together. We got a place on Music Row, and it was just music 24/7, or like 14 hours a day. And that led into business in a unique way. I think that, as our band was starting to perform and starting to get some awareness, I kind of saw this fork in the road. It was like, you could either try and sign a record deal and like go that more traditional path, or I had this kind of crazy idea that we could start our own record label and raise some funds and put together a team and oversee that process. So in discussions with my bandmate, he's like, look, I'll agree to it if you do all the work, like all the business side. And I said, okay, let's do it. So I signed up for quite a big chunk of activity with that. Yes. But incorporated our record label at age 21, tapped into family, friends, and built a network of advisors and mentors, and managed to raise about $110,000 or so over a period of many months, and basically really had the opportunity to make a go of it. So there I was at 21, like writing, playing in a band, but then for many hours a day, hiring a team, overseeing like booking agent and all the other components that like go into being a band. And it was incredibly rewarding, and it was also a lot of work, and it was also a lot of like just emotional volatility. Like some days it would feel amazing, and some days I'd be so just overwhelmed and stressed and not even know what to do next necessarily. But one thing after another led to getting a handle on the business side of things, and that was a really formative experience. The net effect was we executive produced our own album, signed a distribution deal, got a manager, booking agent, radio promo, and we toured the country twice. In 2005, we played shows in over 10 states, had music on 300 plus radio stations. We had a bunch of our songs used on MTV shows like The Real World and Road Rules, if anyone remembers those.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing time once we got a little bit of traction. And, I'll never forget sitting there watching MTV, waiting to hear if our song comes on. Like, that was just super cool, in my opinion, as a result of all the work and energy we put in. But from there, Josh, what happened was, we were on tour at one point, and I remember distinctly thinking, there's no way I'll be doing this when I'm 40. And so then this existential question of, okay, if I'm not doing the only thing I ever wanted to, and that I've been working my butt off to do, what would I do? And I didn't get an answer immediately, but that moment and that thought process eventually led to us winding down the band, deciding we would do one album cycle, instead of doing a whole next, iteration of that. And then I basically transitioned out of music and started to explore. I got really interested by the creative side of business. Like I've always seen entrepreneurship and business as a creative act. And I think the creativity is what type of product or service do we put together and bring to market and work with people and engage with people and be on that producer side of the economic equation. So that led to a string of consulting, first with companies in music, and then branching out to tech and other types of businesses, and eventually started raising money with and for companies and became an investment banker with no college degree, 2007, 8-ish. And then lost a lot of money and was hit pretty hard in that crash from 2008, 9, pivoted again and started a renewable energy credits business with a couple partners and eventually a promotional products business. And at this point, I was 28, 29. And after the promotional products business, I managed to go from standing start to over $500,000 in sales in our first year, and then actually sold the business 18 months after founding it. Now, not for crazy money, not like retirement money or anything, but at that point, I really saw clearly, or I felt drawn myself to write out what did I just do? Like I went from an idea to building a business, having a team, and being able to sell a business. So I created value in a way. But that's when I started writing, and that became a big pivot into writing my own book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, which was published by 2 different publishers, first in Asia and then later in the US and the rest of the world. And so I went through this process that you're going through, that many authors, every author has gone through, of writing and releasing a book. Eventually it became a number 2 business bestseller in Asia. I toured Malaysia, Singapore, spoke at book fairs, shook hands, signed books, and kissed babies, I like to say. And this was in 2012. Well, year or two later, friends of mine that were working on books themselves would ask me for advice and for guidance. And eventually they started to say, can you just do it for me? I was like, do what? Like write the book? They're like, no, like everything else. I was like, oh, the publishing side. And there was the next idea or the next invitation. And I started saying yes. And now 8 years later, we've got Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, internationally distributed. We have over 100 authors that I've had the pleasure of working with directly, like yourself. And that's a little bit about my background. I'll pause it there and see where it leads.
Wow. Yeah, first of all, impressive. And most of that I did not know. So like the listeners or the viewers, I'm learning this first time. It's very, very exciting and interesting and impressive. So, my hat's off to you. And I see now why it's called Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, right? Because that was the name of your first book. And it really makes sense because you have had this sort of entrepreneur's mindset from a very young age. I guess young in considering compared to most people that are trying to become entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's really, really, really impressive. So you're now running this company, and you're what was it like, getting your first deal or your first author? Because I always like to think like it's worth celebrating when you create something, you get it to a point where you're ready to rock and roll, and then you rock and roll. And that first 2, 3, 4 deals is always kind of interesting. Can you describe what that was like for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because I think those initial clients, they really make for good stories, especially when you look back on it like years later. And so the first book that we published was called Get Paid for Your Pad. It was a book for Airbnb hosts. And there's 2 good friends of mine were the authors. And one of them, the main author, had been doing Airbnb and making good money and figured out some stuff that would help other people. And so, I saw that was the formulation of like what can become a good book. Somebody that's been doing the actual work or doing the thing that they've gained some expertise in and has a desire to share it with other people. Those 2 things combined can be the recipe for a great book. So with that first deal, I didn't have a track record as a publisher. It was glorified self-publishing, if you want to be honest, right? I was just managing the self-publishing platform, but the unique thing was looking at the book as a business development tool, and not just, hey, I'll help you put the book together and get it edited and designed and put it out. But where does this lead in terms of like your next 1 to 2 years of what you'd like to focus on? And that was a part of my own author process that I didn't share. But my book was a foundation for an audio training course, for weekend seminars that I would run, and even a higher priced one-on-one coaching to help people launch their own online business. And so that was the model that I took to Get Paid for Your Pad, and to all the way up to the awareness shift, which we'll talk about, of looking at where does this book fit into the next phase of growth in the author's career, and advising, as best as I can on that. So put together the book, pushed it out, did it as big of a launch as we could, and we had some success. It hit top 5 travel books. It hit top 5 business books and entrepreneurship. Hit a top category for, I think there was a short-term rentals or something category. But point being, it was a nice, I think back on it now, the first book that we published had a decent amount of success. And I think if that wasn't the case, I might not have gone down this path. Like if I tried 1 or 2 books and they just kind of like fizzled, I'd be like, all right, well, time to find something else to do, right? But Get Paid for Your Pad worked. They started a podcast of the same name. I think it's still going, hundreds of episodes later. And even went to the Airbnb headquarters, and we've got a picture of Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, holding Get Paid for Your Pad with the authors next to him. So I was like, holy cow, cool. This is happening.
That's cool.
And then the second, third, I think even fourth book, I did these all with like no money up front, just a percentage share on the book, because I wanted to prove out, like, can I do this? Is this something I want to formalize? Is this something I want to build a business on? So that's a little bit on the first book and the early books. And essentially we're doing the exact same thing now, but at a bigger scope, being more involved, have more team, have editors, design, layout, marketing in-house, as opposed to just pulling together subcontractors, right? So as I went from, as I became clear that I did want to build a publishing company, then that progressively became a bigger offering to authors. We can do, I call it done for you publishing, which is essentially what the name says. Like we're a partner through the whole process in all the different ways that materializes leading up to the book coming out and beyond.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because you touched on a few things that also bring about questions. Because like I can just imagine the many listeners or viewers thinking, okay, I've always wanted to write a book, or people tell me I should write a book. And sometimes the idea is usually, well, you've got to have a big social media following to write a book, or you've got to have like the world's craziest story to write a book and get it published, or you've got to have access to the New York Times bestsellers committee or something, and also there's all these things that I think keep people from actually making that step. And I'll be honest, like I was faced with that as well. I was faced with this notion of people always telling me, Josh, with all the people that you work with and all of the stories that you have, like you should write a book. But I knew that wasn't the move for me because I'm very private when it comes to my clients, because I don't ever want to be viewed as someone that would sort of exploit any of those relationships. At the same time, what you touched on, I think, is exactly why I decided to ultimately write a book. And that is, if you have been doing something for a long time and you feel like that should be shared and that can help other people and get that message out, then that's probably a good recipe for a book. And that's exactly what we did with the awareness shift. I've been a trainer, as you know, I've been a trainer and a health coach now for the better part of 2 decades. And I'm just now rolling out sort of my method. And I even have hesitancy in calling it a method because it just happens to be my experience based on what I do with clients and what I've seen tends to work. And I was able to consolidate that. And I had to really consolidate that to write a book, but I was able to consolidate that in this written format together with you guys and my co-writer, Tessa Cash, who actually, for those who will eventually read the book, Tessa was a former client of mine. And I felt like that was the best opportunity to work with someone who's a writer, who has skills in writing, knowing that I don't necessarily enjoy physically putting pen to paper, because I'm more of a talker. I like to talk, and that's actually how we ended up writing this book, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I want to just say these things for the person that is out there waiting for the right moment. I think right now is the right moment, and this is exactly what we talked about before we hit record today, about my setting up a Calendly or setting up a Linktree account. Like, I finally just decided to do it, and I'm already reaping the benefits like so much. And so for the person that's listening to this right now, you might just need that little bit of motivation, listening to this podcast, watching this show, to go, okay, you know what? Let me reach out to these guys. Let me reach out to whomever. Let me get that writer. If you're not a writer, find someone who is, So, yeah. Anyway, let me shut up. Maybe you can comment on that, because I'm sure you see it a lot.
Yeah, no, it's really valuable insight. And I'm fond of saying, if you're thinking about writing a book and you feel called to and you feel drawn to, that's essentially the signal to take at least some action in the direction. Like, I'm not a fan of telling anybody, hey, you should write a book, because that's kind of like opening Pandora's box, because it's a big process. It's involved. It's definitely not just a one-time thing like a podcast or doing a blog post. It's definitely an undertaking, but it should start from that internally guided place of desire to share, the accumulated experience and wisdom and knowledge that you have, with the purpose of helping the reader shorten their learning curve, learn things faster and better and easier than trial and error, and helping them accomplish something specific. And I think a book is a great vehicle to help somebody definitively, accomplish something or solve a problem in their life or learn a new skill or get authentic perspective on somebody else's experience. Books can really deliver the goods in this respect. And so, yeah, with that, like, you don't have to sit down and write the whole book, I think is hopefully good news for some people listening to this, meaning, there's been many times where, you could collaborate with a co-writer, you could get clear on an outline and then sort of dictate it or speak it. You could team up with someone and have them do little soft interviews of you that unpacks the information and reveals it, and other tactics as well. But I find one of the things that prevents a lot of people from entering this process is thinking, oh, I'm not a good writer. And the actual thought that I have to sit down and type 50,000 words or something can be a hard stop for some people. And yet I've worked with a number of authors where they've written very little, but we've still produced a great book. And I guess in just sharing that, that's possible for anybody that's thought it isn't. But there's a number of ways to create and get the content down for the book. It's ultimately going to be unique for each author or set of authors based on what's correct or what's accurate and real for them. So our process is to help find out what that best approach is and support it. And then bring our team in the appropriate places to help keep moving it all forward.
Yeah. So, I kind of think there's part of this is potentially like a double-edged sword, in that you've got some people who think, I think incorrectly think, or misguided thinking of, you have to sit down and you have to write it, blah, 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 blah. So we just covered that. But then there's the other side, which is people who have written a book and they've already written it. They just need to get it published. And even that requires some adjustment as well, because, this is what I was faced with. I believe when Len first worked with you guys, I think he had a book written, or at least thought he needed to have the full book written. And then came to find out that after many, many iterations and changes, that, the book finally got written, because you had to have a lot of changes. So even if you are a good writer, even if you do have a book completed and you need it to get it published, consider the fact that, like you said, this is not a one-time thing. You really got to work with somebody, especially a publisher who's done this, is tried and tested. You've done this a number of times, from, like you said, I think it's 20 years or it's been 8 years at least with the with Lifestyle, right? Entrepreneurs Press. So I think that was a big sense of security for me, is knowing that A, you work with first-time authors, B, your company sort of specializes in the health and wellness category. That was a big one for me. I wasn't, my book wasn't going to be the only one in health and wellness, so that was also very very assuring for me. And I think the biggest question I had was, are you guys going to be able to help us when it comes to the editing? Because, it's like, again, back to my dictating or voicing out this entire book through voice notes with Tessa. She also, this is her first time writing a book, even though she's written a bunch of other things for me, for my website and things like that. She still was unsure, like, would she be able to carry out this task of writing in someone else's voice? And so, again, I'm only saying all these things because I've gone through it, and I think it might help someone else in the future go, oh, you know what? It's not as bad as I thought it would be. I don't want you to be crippled by these ideas that are just so lofty, to keep you from actually finishing the book.
Yeah. I love this conversation, because when we get into like the thick of it a little bit more, past the idea or the initial desire and into the process, that's where there's a lot of potential to take it in any number of directions. And I'll put it these two different ways. Like, on the one hand, a good solid chapter in a book is just one key idea expressed in just the way that you want to share it. And so a book is a collection of related ideas that get the same treatment. And if you chunk it down like that, maybe it starts to feel a little more manageable. Whereas if you just look at a blank page and you're like, okay, where do I begin? Then it can feel a little more overwhelming. But then the art of it is, okay, well, what do I really want to say about this topic? Which story from my own life experience or from working with a client do I want to share that illustrates it? And then what's the actionable takeaway for the reader? Or what can the reader pull from this other than entertainment value that helps shift something in their world? And that's the lens that I encourage authors to look at it through. And I think what's made it like more manageable is to chunk down to that outline, or getting clear and getting consensus on, okay, here's the main points that we want to cover. Here's the flow of the book. That's like half of the process right there. And then the other half is having a schedule or having a flow that gets the main ideas down for each of those chapters. and presents it as well as possible, but it doesn't have to be 100%. Like you
Mhm.
mentioned, one of the appeals was having an editorial team that can work with you through the process. I think that's incredibly valuable. Like, and here's a little open secret, even if someone comes to us with a book and says, "Hey, I've got the manuscript," that may be the case, but I know that it's going to change as we go through the editing process, and I'm confident that the result will always be the right book. So that's my criteria for when it's done, is when we get it right. There may be different paths to get there, and there are, but I think part of my role as publisher is to hold that intention of, we're going to get the best book possible that most accurately conveys your expertise and your knowledge and some great stories from your life. And however we get there, we'll get there, as long as we're both actively engaged in it.
So then I can't help but try to offer as much advice for potential authors out there. What type of author or client is not the right client for Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press?
Yeah, good question. So our main publishing focuses are health and wellness, big one for us, entrepreneurship and business, and self-help, which includes spirituality topics. And that's it. Um, Earlier on, I focused on, I signed a few fiction authors because I love a good novel. But I
Mhm.
quickly learned that fiction and nonfiction are like two roads diverged in a woods, right? It's just a totally different ballgame to write a good fiction book, to promote it, to build an audience and engagement around it. So eventually, I left that alone in terms of our publishing focus, and we also don't touch anything that's like political or, um, yeah. I mean, those are our core focuses. So the
Okay.
ideal fit would be somebody in business, health and wellness, self help, that also has, that also works with clients in some capacity, whether that's owns a business, is a trainer, works one on one with select number of more elite people like yourself, or that's spoken in many different venues, or is a semi-public figure with their message already. That's the sweet spot, and any combination of those is fine. But what that allows is for the book to become that business development tool. Because if we fast forward here, we've been talking about like the desire to write, the writing process, even the publishing process. But once the book is done and out, the amazing thing that happens is people will discover you for the first time through the book. And then the only knowledge and the only experience they have is this well crafted piece of literature, right? And so if somebody discovers the book, however they do, reads it, says, "Wow, this is amazing. I'd love to learn more. I'd love to work with that person, or I'd love to get training and support around these ideas." Well, that's part of our strategy as publisher and author, is what else can they do next? Where do they go
Mhm.
from the book? And when we can answer that question, then the full potential of the book becomes available. Meaning, like, somebody could read my book and then sign up for a course, or reach out about one-on-one consulting, or listen to a ton of podcasts that I've done. So it becomes a springboard into the rest of the support that I've made available, or any author makes available.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's where I excel. And so that's the really exciting part about this. Um, and what was interesting, I will admit this, when I first got into working with you guys, um, I thought it was interesting that we collectively decided to do a crowdfunding campaign before the manuscript was finished, right? And for me, I was like, oh wow, there was a lot of like, um, yeah, I don't know, like, I wasn't quite sure if we should be doing it like that, but I just wanted to trust the process, you know? And so I'm just admitting to you now, like at first I'm like, I'm in Budapest and we're doing a crowdfunding campaign. I don't even have a book finished. I don't even have a manuscript finished yet. I'm asking people for their money. But what that did show was that there was a number of people. I forget what number we ended up reaching, but we surpassed our goal, and which was exciting. But it also showed me that there's a certain market out there of people who trust what I'm putting out. And that gave me so much confidence to finish the book. So much confidence. And, there was a lot of back and forth, having to I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants type of guy. I like to just go with the flow. And so, I'm like, yeah, no, I'll put up a post whenever I can put it up, and some of your team was like, no, we need to do this right now because this is how it works. And I'm like, okay. But we did it. And so here we are now. I mean, this is the reason why we're recording right now is because we're beginning this launch. The book should be out in the next few weeks. And by the time this podcast launches and is live, we'll be a couple weeks away. And I'm excited to get my hands on this advanced reader copy. And I'm already starting this process of doing a little mini tour alongside Roger Waters' tour. So for all you music fans out there, and Jesse, you're a music fan too. I plan on really leveraging my reach, and this is where I excel. And this is kind of where Tessa gets a chance to take the back seat. And she told me this from the beginning. She's like, look, I can help you write the book, but I am not a marketing person. I'm not a branding person. And I said, don't worry, I'm not a writer, but I am a branding and marketing person. So let's go, So I feel like we're a good team in that. So thank you for sharing it, because I do think it's quite interesting. At least it's interesting for me, and I hope it's interesting for the people listening and watching. So another question I have though
Well,
is,
can I jump in there real quick, Josh?
Yeah, please.
You touched on, the crowdfunding side and not having a book, but asking people for money and how that created a certain level of commitment, and motivation. That was the design is, by asking for buy-in up front, or at least by sharing the idea and saying, do you want to, pre-order this or contribute to this campaign? It's one way to approach it. We don't do a crowdfunding with every author necessarily, but it creates that community of support at the beginning of the process. And I think it can create accountability, because even if you're feeling stuck in the writing or something, hey, people have already raised their hand and taken out their wallet. It's a very different thing than if you're just sitting there saying, should I write a book? Should I just do something else? And there's no consequence if you choose something else, unless people have already funded and raised their hand and invested in that. So I find, and you tell me if I think you said it was the case as well, but it creates a connection that can see you through the earlier stage of the process once you really get into it.
Well said. And that's basically where I was headed with this, which was, the various processes. But you hit the nail on the head. You said it perfectly. And that's exactly what happened with me. And, again, opening the kimono, there were several times, even after the crowdfunding campaign, that Tessa and I, mostly Tessa, because she was the one tasked with the biggest part of creating the book, which is the writing. There were several times that, we had messages back and forth to each other. We were on the phone. She's crying because she's just not sure she can do it. And by the time we got to where we are now, Tessa, once we finalized the manuscript, she sends me this card, which is the most beautiful message on there, because she's a writer, right? But it was basically explaining that many things she does in life, she never fully finishes. But this one she did, right? And so that was huge for her. And then knowing that about her, but hearing that from her in the form of writing was huge for me as well. And so, by design, I assumed it was by design, but it was just beautiful to watch it unfold and to be a part of it. So to be in the middle of it while it's unfolding is like, wow. Because there was a couple times when I'm like, Tess, like, people have already spent their money. We raised so much money, and it wasn't about the money to put in our pockets. This is to be utilized to do the whole publishing process, to come up with all the things. So it's like, we need to get this done. It's going to get done one way or another. That was my stance, right? So luckily there's two of us, right? Because one of us was not going to quit no matter what. you know So yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I hope this provides some kind of motivation for people out there.
Yeah, I mean, I really love what you just shared there, Joshua, because for me, that's one of the most rewarding parts of this whole business of being a publisher. It's to be part of that process where people like yourself and Tessa really complete something significant. And whether or not in another context she would have seen a project through, like she had you and you both have me and our team, and that's what we're here for. Like at the end of the day, it's to anchor the process and make sure that it keeps moving. um, and on the other side of that, right, like what you described is not entirely unique. Other authors have moments of doubt, moments of just wanting to say just screw it. But on the other side of that, there's something valuable to be revealed, both personally as the author. Like there's something incredibly rewarding about seeing the finished product of the time that it went into it. And from the publisher, it's rewarding for me to see these projects come to life and then ultimately impact people and read reviews and um, hear anecdotally like what the book has done for others and what that means to the author. Just on a rewarding level, that's really a fun part of this. And obviously it's not without its ups and downs throughout the process, but we're in the business of seeing these things through to completion. And when we get there, that's a real reason to celebrate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I'm the kind of host that likes to really unpack and uncover many different facets of a story. And so the thing that comes to mind now is like, all right, what happens when it really does not work out like that, like we just described? Like, what happens when there's so much doubt that it's not going to go through? What do you do then, or has that ever happened?
Yeah, the truth is it's happened. Not a ton of times. I'd say a couple of things on that. Like, we don't always start working with an author before any words have been written. It's actually easier and in some cases better, in my opinion, if the author's already started writing or is partway through a manuscript, or in some cases has written a first draft, because that's really where the publishing process starts. Like within the whole book experience, there's writing and publishing, the two major buckets. And the writing can be the real variable. It is the real variable because whatever is going to happen in that process is going to happen. But once there's a manuscript in place, then it becomes more linear with editing, design, visual branding, layout, different formats, marketing strategy. All of that is much more of a straight line in my view, whereas the writing is an open and creative process. And if it doesn't work, I mean, there's a handful of cases where despite our best efforts and despite the author giving it a real shot, like it just didn't work. And that means that there's not a book to publish. It's fortunately it's fairly rare, and I think over time I've gotten at least a little better at tuning in at the very front end and gauging like the level of commitment and it's definitely making a commitment to sign with a publisher, just as it's a commitment for us to commit to an author. And we've been in our process here, I believe, over a year, right? And books coming
Yeah.
out soon. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's we can go back to this point of it definitely being a process. It's not just a one and done thing. And over the course of a year or over many months, any number of things can happen in the author's life, in the world, in their business. And so it's more of just navigating whatever's coming up within the container of commitment, as opposed to being outside the container of commitment means you could pull the plug on it, right? Say,
Right.
you know what, this just got too hard, I'm out. But that's not the way that we operate, right? And that's definitely what I'm checking in with, as I talk to an author before we would sign them or put a publishing agreement on the table. Because in the events where that doesn't work out, like, then there's no victory. There's nothing. It's just kind of a sad whimper of an ending instead of the beginning of something great and new and next. But like with every undertaking, sometimes it just won't work out, and that is part of the process. But
Yeah. Well
yeah,
said. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Yeah, it definitely does not sound easy when and if that occurs. Um, so before we carry on, something I actually forgot to prep you on, but this is a fun part of the show, and I just kind of started doing this recently. I have this what do you call this? An hourglass. So
yep.
this is a true hourglass. I meant for this to be a 30-minute glass, right? So not a full hour, but just a 30-minute. And the reason for that is because I want to incorporate, being that this is a health and wellness and sort of lifestyle podcast, I want to incorporate Pomodoro breaks into every episode. And so the last 2 episodes, 3 episodes, I've been doing that. And I've been offering the opportunity for the guest on the show and for the listeners and viewers to understand the importance of getting out of a sedentary state for long periods of time. So, with that, um, is there something that you do or something that you would like to show um, to kind of get you out of your moment of sedentary state?
Oh yeah. I mean, in between calls, in between meetings, I go outside. And best case scenario, I go outside barefoot in my garden and walk around on grass and maybe do a few push-ups or stretch. And
Perfect.
when it's summer, jump in the pool, swim a couple laps. But yeah, just on like a productivity and health and wellness tip, I mean, for sure, I don't like sitting all day. Um, Even though I do sit sometimes a good amount of the day, I always break it up with going outside, doing some kind of motion, whether it's little light exercise or a dip or walk around the block. And I find that by honoring that, I've got a good continual like flow of energy. And I definitely
Amazing.
advise that to anybody else is like, I know that you're the expert in this, but don't just sit on your butt for 8 hours at a time, or you're gonna be asking for health and wellness issues, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I could offer, because that's a very good list. So thank you for sharing that. And I think in order to really maximize on this Pomodoro break, what I could offer is anyone that is listening right now or watching. Um, See, for me, I'm standing when I do these podcasts, and a lot of people think that just standing eliminates the need to move. And I think that's very incorrect, because any sedentary state, even though I kind of shift around here and there, I still feel like there's an opportunity to get some kind of movement in. So, if you will, for me, let's just do a simple shoulder roll, just like this. So we're going to roll our shoulders. We're going to get some movement in, just to kind of tell the body that we're okay, right? It's not sleep time. And what I find when we do this, is change the direction now. what I find when we do things like this, it helps the blood flow, and I think it helps to make the conversation and the interview go even more profound. We're already doing really well. We could even, I see you kind of getting some good movements in there. If you guys are only listening, you're missing out because Jesse is grooving right now. And I can definitely understand that he was a rock star in his early days. So I love it. So thank you for that. And by the way, if you could dig up any of those old like videos or songs, maybe we can add that to this because I think
Yeah,
that
let's
would
link
be
it up.
amazing. Yeah.
We've got our old music video is still out there. We'll put a link in for it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'll link to it, and maybe I can even extract some video and put it in. So we were getting to that point in which we were just finishing up by saying that all these situations don't always pan out, but you've gotten really good at identifying those that do work well and those that may not work as well. And so once a person figures out, okay, I want to write a book, I want to get started, they reach out to you or someone like you, and I guess you guys collectively figure out what's the best step forward. Do we go with the crowdfunding campaign, or do you go with some other means of buy-in, right? Some other means of commitment. And I think you kind of have different platforms for that, right? You have different ways about going about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, overall, we either have what's like a $15,000 all-inclusive fee, or we do a crowdfunding campaign and raise funds that way up front. They both lead to the exact same place. It's the same publishing process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm shying a little bit away from the crowdfunding these days, just because if the book hasn't been written, it can be a long journey from doing a crowdfunding campaign to when somebody's holding that book in their hand. But I still appreciate that, as a vehicle. And what it does is it puts people in the marketing and sales mindset at the beginning of the process. Whereas if we sign an author and we're working closely for many months, or they're writing and then we're editing, at some point they're going to start sharing about the book, but that could be months and months into the process, versus with crowdfunding, it's right up front. And there's pros and cons to both, but the publishing process is basically identically the same, regardless of how we initiate it with the author.
Yeah, and I can piggyback on that by saying my experience with doing the crowdfunding campaign was that it opened up more eyeballs to my brand. It helped to kind of increase my brand because I think certain people won't even invite you onto their podcast if you don't have a book to promote, or some people don't take you as seriously unless you have a book to promote. And one of the good things I was able to do, and fortunately we did have an idea. We knew the outline. Tessa and I knew the outline and sort of the chunks that you spoke about earlier. We had the chunks basically worked out. We just didn't have it fully written and whatnot. So it was easy for us to be able to come up with a crowdfunding campaign because, again, I think I'm good at doing videos, and we did a podcast in which Tessa and I talked about it. I'll link to that in this episode as well. And so, but I just don't want people to miss out on the notion of being able to increase your branding, to increase the awareness in others. And there were people that I didn't even knew about my book, and people that I hadn't talked to since high school were like, "Oh, I heard you got a book coming out," and like, and that's something I just also created. I'll probably do a whole podcast about this as well, but I recently just started, I get people commenting me about my shirts, right? And so I use the podcast to kind of test out different shirt patterns. And this is my logo on a shirt. And I always get people asking me about it. It's a good conversation starter. And I finally, just kind of like the crowdfunding campaign before finishing a book, I decided to just throw it up for sale on Teespring. And I just did this a couple days ago, and people are buying shirts. And it's like, oh, all I had to do was just make it happen. Like, I just had to sign up for it and put it up there and see what happens. And so there you go. And that's kind of, I offer that for people listening to say that, again, sometimes you just got to put one foot in front of the other and keep it moving. Just go, just get started.
Yeah. I mean, I would add into that a couple things really, like, great to put it up and make it available is like the necessary precursor before someone else can take action. If you didn't put it on Teespring, or if you didn't do a crowdfunding campaign, but you just made a post or did a podcast saying, hey, I'm going to do a book and it's going to be awesome, I'll let you know when it's out, then there's no action that even the most passionate person can take. So I think there's a lot of value in making something available and then making noise about it. Like, and even throughout the writing process, throughout the publishing process, the launch process, it doesn't just have to be, hey, the book's coming out. Hey, the book's coming out. You can talk about, hey, here's what it was like struggling with this one chapter, but we finally got it. And here's me and my co-author, batting ideas back and forth, and we came up with something great. Like, to the extent people are willing, each part of the process is something shareable. Mm-hmm. And that can be some of the best book marketing, really, is not just like, here's what's in chapter 1 and you're going to love chapter 1 because it has this. You can be like, here's what it was like for me to really distill down 20 years of personal training into these key components, or these optimal pillars for health and wellness in your case. But yes, you can drip feed. Like, the other thing I'd say on that is, once you have the book written, you're kind of on easy street in terms of marketing, because now you've got maybe 200 pages of content. You don't have to create a bunch of new stuff. That's when you do use the book, and you can give away sample chapters. You can unpack the key idea in one section. You can pose a question. Hey, have you ever dealt with one of these issues? Here's what I talk about in my book, but share your experience. And there's all sorts of prompts and simple little things that I like to share that turn the book content into the marketing message, so to speak, or into the thing that attracts somebody in, makes them want to pick up a copy of the book or buy a copy of the book and read it.
Well said. And again, thanks to you, by the time this video is live, people would have probably gotten an email or two. And I think people are definitely starting to see some little spurts and peppering of promotion here and there. And I do like the idea of not having to overthink or rethink or reinvent the wheel when it comes to the fact that we have a finished book. Now that's the content. It really is the content. And I think that's powerful. And so that's one of the strategies we're going to be doing as well, is just kind of putting some of that out there. And then even with like some of the launch things we are trying to do now, is I want to offer sort of like a master class to kind of take people through in real time some of these concepts in the book. And and then sort of like what you had talked about doing with your book in the beginning, back when, about like trying to create retreats. Like, I have this idea working with a former client of mine in Aspen. But it doesn't have to be just that one scenario, but the idea would be to create retreats, whether it be a 5-day retreat or a 7-day retreat or whatever, but basically taking people through the book based on the concepts laid out. So the different pillars, right? So we could sort of like devote a day to each of the pillars, and then have people, once they go through that, then have them come back and go, you know what? I really learned a lot about the rest and recovery pillar, and I want to actually now dive deeper into that. and then offer, a little bit more sort of like a weekend type of retreat based on those individual pieces. So that's what we plan on doing. And again, that's my marketing brain at work, but it's fun
No, I
because
love
now
the
we have the
sound of it.
content. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love the way that you're thinking about it, because once you have the content, yes, you've got content to share. You can give away um, parts of the book. I'm even okay as a publisher with author giving away all of the book in bite-sized pieces. We had one author that read each chapter as a video, and if somebody watched whatever 25 videos, then they would have consumed the book without buying it. But what happens in that process is they'll watch one or two and be like, this is great, order the book.
Bingo.
Even though it's
Bingo.
there, like you still get it. And on the other side of that, like you mentioned, you've got 5 pillars. That could be a 5-day retreat, or you could have a weekend and do 2 or in one day and 3 in another. Um, but in that setting, right, you're not just going to sit there and read the book and then that's the seminar. Of course, there's more to unpack. There's an interactive component. There's application of the principles, and all of that lends itself to whatever you want to be doing, based on the idea and how you want to engage with people. And that's the exciting part, I think, because there's no limit. You could do 10 different retreats, quite honestly, and each one would probably be unique and use the same core content, but with a little different pivot, right? The 5 pillars of
Right.
health and wellness for entrepreneurs, 5 pillars of health and wellness for moms. And that would be 2 very different courses, but the same key ideas.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, it's interesting too, because the part that I struggled with in the very beginning was, again, trying to create something that is going to be forever, so to speak, with air quotes here, but like something that is going to be forever based on experiential concepts that within my work should and could change over time, right? So this is why I feel like it's as important, if not more important, to have the deeper dives once the book is already out, because like the masterclass, that's going to really answer the questions that people might be having when they're reading it and thinking, really? But I thought this and that. Okay. You can either just read that at face value, or you could sign up for a masterclass, or you could come to a retreat, or you could message me and sign up for a 1-hour session to kind of just talk about some of these things. But I'm with you on the fact that completing the book doesn't mean it's over. That's actually the beginning. That's the launch pad for everything else. So I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's definitely worth re-mentioning over and over and over and over.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, the book, like finishing the book, is both the finish line for one process and the starting line for the even bigger one, which is any number of people in the world being able to get it, consume it. As they do that, there's no marginal time spent on your part. So like, sure, you've put in the work for the last number of months to create it and write it and edit it. But if 1,000 people read the book, that takes 0 extra time on your part. If 10,000 people, 100,000 people, so you get this leverage effect. But then what comes up as a result of that? Like if 1,000 people read a book, the way I see it is there's probably 10 to 20 that are going to be the most hardcore, like want to hire you and do everything that there is available. Maybe there's 50 to 100 people that would gladly sign up for a retreat or join a medium length format experience. And then maybe there's 100 to 200 people that would buy a lower priced, product or offering that complements the book. And so that's just ballpark math, but out of every 1,000 books, you could pick up dozens or 100+ customers that want to do something else with you and your business. And that's the exciting part, because my book initially came out in 2012. It's 2022 and people are still getting the book and it's still applicable. I'm not doing all of the training and the stuff that I did to help people start businesses now, but anybody could still read the book and start an online business that lets them travel and pursue the things they're interested in.
So cool.
Notably, with no extra time involved on my part. So it helps create that separation of just working one-to-one or just working in a group format or working directly with people versus people being able to learn from you and learn from your experience and then pop up in your world and say, oh my God, I learned so much in your book and it was so helpful and I did this and this and can I hire you? And
Yeah.
those are fun conversations to get in. It's like, it's pretty rewarding to have somebody read your book and then reach out and share what it meant to them and ask what they could do with you.
Absolutely. So I think we're at a point where I want to show the website. So again, if you're just listening, I'm going to go to lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com. And if you don't know how to spell entrepreneurs, Google it. So I'm going to share this now, and then we can kind of look at the different components on there, and you'll see yours truly's book on there. So right now I'm on the about page, about us. There's Mr. Jesse Krieger. There he is, founder and publisher. And then we go to books, and if we drop down to, you see, as Jesse mentioned earlier, the kind of the main categories is entrepreneurship, health and wellness, spirituality. And so we'll go to health and wellness. Let's see if we can find the awareness shift. And so one of the first ones I see up here, health and wellness, on this image is my buddy Lynn May's book, Making Cannabis Personal. Shout out to Lynn. And then if we scroll down, we see here the awareness shift.
Look at
So look at that. It's got your boy with no shirt on in the jungle.
Oh yeah, I love that cover image.
Thank you.
Getting to the root of it, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got it. So the awareness shift unearthed the 5 pillars of optimal health and wellness. And it's got a bunch of info here about the book, about Tessa and I. I think there's even, some videos that we linked to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff there. Obviously, you guys can go and order. And this will be up. And, hopefully you get as much of it as you need. And then we'll also be doing some promotions in which we offer some more like rewards for different bundles and things like that. But I just wanted to at least bring this up because people may be wondering. So there's that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Looking good on there.
It does look good. Yeah. I'm excited because, I hadn't put out too much of the imagery yet because I just want people to be very, very curious. And I think once I start really blasting it out there, then I think people will start to understand. And I do love like seeing it on Amazon and reading like the product description and things like that, because this is what I do when I'm researching books. I'd go and look at the product description, and it kind of gives me an idea like, okay, do I get the book? Do I not get the book? So that's all there. I'll put all the necessary links to everything on here. But in sort of closing or quasi closing, where do you see this all going? Where do you see Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press? What is on the horizon for Mr. Jesse Krieger?
Yeah, well, first I would say we'll continue doing what we've been doing. Like I enjoy working with a few dozen authors per year, usually 20 to 30, no more. And that's going to continue. I think the future looks like we're putting a lot more energy into connecting to our readers. For many years, in fact, almost the whole time I've had this business, almost all of our communication and my messaging has been to authors, to potential authors. to, people that are actively looking at writing a book. And that's 100 plus authors at this point. But when we look at the number of books we've sold, now in the hundreds of thousands of copies of books, that's the much bigger pool of everybody that's ever bought in a book we publish. So looking at how can we communicate more with readers. We're doing a Readers Are Leaders initiative. We've got like a group and a place where readers can connect with each other and learn about other books. So I guess being more proactive in like how we introduce the different books that we do publish and make connections between them. Because if somebody reads The Awareness Shift, right, then there's a good chance that they'd be interested in at least one or more other health and wellness books, and possibly a spirituality book, and maybe even a business book. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity, and it's something that I'm passionate about, is like how to create like a choose your own adventure for people that are interested in one book of ours. That's their entry point. But then, hey, what else are you focused on? What else do you want to learn? What other problems do you want to solve? What else do you want to accomplish? The answer to those questions will reveal 1 to 2 book recommendations that would be just the right fit. And so, yeah, just saying it, that gets me excited, because the books we've already published have lifetime value, but a book from 3-4 years ago might not be as visible to somebody that's just coming in and say buying your book when it comes out. But I think we can intelligently introduce other books and create a reader community in addition to serving and supporting the authors that we publish.
Beautiful. This has been very fascinating. I myself have learned quite a bit about you and about the company, even though we've worked closely together for more than a year. It's been more than a year now, and so this has been very fun for me, for sure. So as we start to kind of wrap this up, you probably know that I like to ask a couple questions just so we can get to know a little bit more about you, today's guest. And one of those first questions is a fun one. I want you to have fun with this one. But what are your top 2 pet peeves? What come to mind as your top 2 pet peeves right now?
Sure. Pet peeve is if I'm out somewhere like socially or publicly and people just start having like a political discussion and just spouting off about whatever's going on in the world. Like, it really kind of gets under my skin.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think it's just disempowering to be like just running one's mouth on whatever's in the news. And it affects me. I mean, I'm a connoisseur of the written word and well edited and thought out ideas. So it is a pet peeve if people are just mouthing off without thinking about it.
Well said. I call that a lack of nunchi, which we discuss in the book Nunchi. So if you're curious about what that means, then you got to get the book. So that's
Nice
a very
plug.
good one. Thank you. I told you I'm good at this, right? Okay, so what would be another pet peeve? I like that one. That's a good one.
Another pet peeve is having too many things scheduled in the day. Like even in this podcast, we rolled our shoulders, we took a little break. If I find that I've got just stuff scheduled back to back to back, then I become more like irritable, or I don't feel as good about meeting number 7 or 8 as I did meeting numbers 1 and 2. So sometimes it happens, but pet peeve would be not having enough space or time within the schedule. So yeah, I'd say
that's a really good one, and actually I think it's probably a first on the show, but one in which I can offer some advice for those listening and watching this, because in that moment, first thing that comes to mind is balance, right? So that's the first thing that comes to mind, and probably the thing that most people would butt that up against, or attack that with, right? It's just say, oh no, you got to have balance. But as of like a few weeks ago, I came to this understanding that it's actually more about boundaries than it is balance, and that has stuck with me, for the last few weeks, and probably will for the rest of my life, because creating boundaries, or having good boundaries, creates the balance. And so, I would offer that to you and anyone listening, getting in situations like that. And I think boundaries has really opened up a lot of doors for me. It literally recently, the fact that I kind of started to focus on creating better boundaries and being more selective in the things that I want to do and need to do, versus just trying to take on everything, because I feel like I gotta be doing everything. Um, I started to create better boundaries, and lo and behold, so many more things opened up for me. So it's just a moment to, and again, these are the kind of discussions that I would have around these ideas within the book, things that I'm learning as we go. Because a year ago, when we were writing this book, there were so many things that had not occurred to me then, but have now. This is the other reason to kind of to take on any of these rewards that we might put out, these bundles we might put out, or any kind of discussions about the book, even this one here. Like, I feel like people can start to learn more as they stay tuned. So if this isn't a good plug for staying tuned, I don't know what is, So
100%.
okay, so Jesse, where can people find out more about you and all the things that you've got going on?
For sure, check out lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com. And, if you want to hear more from me, Google my name, Jesse Krieger, and Google that and podcast. I've done countless, podcasts breaking down different aspects of the author process, the publishing process, how to use a book in your business. And I enjoy it. I love coming on shows like this. I really appreciate you bringing me on here. Even though I work with the written word as my profession, I actually enjoy speaking, interview, dialogue as a way to get the message out. So I've got a lot of that out there. And feel free to reach out, and we can explore if publishing a book sounds like something you want to do. Then maybe we wind up having a conversation about your book one of these days.
Indeed. And are you on all the socials, like
Yeah.
Instagram?
Instagram, we're at LE Press Books. And we've got a group on Facebook called Readers Are Leaders. That was what I mentioned with the Reader Initiative. So I'll get links. We'll get links for those. And
Perfect.
I'm on LinkedIn too. If you want to connect, just search for me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we did it, man. We finally did it. I will admit that I had to look down a couple times to make sure we were actually recording, and we were. So we don't have to do this over. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Jesse. I really mean that. I feel like I learned so much, and this could have been a much easier process had we done this beforehand. But hey, we did it, right? And I'm glad that we went through this book process together, and I really look forward to seeing what we can accomplish. I feel like already it's been getting a good amount of excitement, and I am waiting now just to start hearing what people think about it once they start reading it. So, um, if I remember correctly, the published date is, I believe it's June 28th. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So if you're listening to this after June 28th, 2022, then the book is out and hopefully you have it in your hand. But if you're listening to it before, those who did the pre-orders way back when last summer, I believe they may be getting them earlier than the published date. which is exciting. And also just kind of stay tuned on all the social media platforms, because I will be doing some book signings and some discussions at bookstores, and I'm going to be doing all kinds of stuff. So if you would like to find out more about this, send me a message, hit up Jesse, hit up myself. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the show. So this is Josh signing out from Simply Walk the Talk with Jesse Krieger from Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen. Better come give us a minute or two. Open the box up, we giving you tools. Giving your engine the fuel that it needs. Breathing into it, it's autoimmune. Make a connection, we're stronger in two. Making us one of a kind of a few. Work on the mind, but show me your moves. If you do what you say, you know what to do. Yeah.
Simply walk the